Oh, that's great.
So we're recording. Carrie Perry, Dr. Carrie Perry.
Thank you. Yes.
It's over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me on a Sunday evening post 4th of July celebrations. I'm going to talk about advertising in action. Now, it's also going to include a really down and dirty history of advertising. And I'm just going to give you my version of an overview of advertising. So if you have a question, just please let me know. Interrupt me, and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. So we're going to talk about, like I said, the history. We're going to talk about some of the goals of advertising, how advertising actually uses emotional appeals, advertising strategy, what the tactics are, and where it's going. So, a little caveat here. I'm really not going to talk about the debate that involves advertising, such as whether it should even exist, evils of advertising, whether advertising manipulates consumers. If you want my opinions on that, you can ask me afterwards. Now, I have two commercials here, and I don't think that I'm going to show them. I'm going to let you guys look at them. But one of the reasons that I usually include the Chevrolet commercial that can be found on YouTube, it's called Then and Now, 100 Years of Chevrolet. And it juxtaposes an old, well, I can see if it will play. Let me see if you guys can even see it. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, but not hear the sound.
You can't hear the sound. Okay, what's playing is America the Beautiful. And if you look at it, it's just a before and now, a then and now picture of how far Chevy has come. Okay. And you can look at that on your own, and you can hear the music behind it. I use that commercial as a setup for how not just pervasive advertising is, but how embedded in culture is advertising. Okay, so where did it all begin? Well, it all began with wine in Babylon, and with two wine merchants trying to coax customers that their wine was better. Okay. Now, there were no words then. It was just pictures. And as advertising has evolved, we have gone from just the image to the words, the use of symbols, uses of cultural innuendos. So just kind of keep it in mind as we go through the presentation. The first sales messages, the first, I guess you could say, written with hieroglyphics were the Egyptians. And there have been lost and found advertising also in ancient Greek and in Rome. Rock painting for commercial advertising. So basically, since the known origins of civilized society, advertising has existed. So it's not something that's a recent development. But the printing press is what really exploded advertising as we know it today. And the reason is because for the first time, really, everybody could be exposed to advertising. So I'm going to skip ahead now to the 1900s, and we're going to look at two founding concepts that all advertising is based on. First of all, the power of ideas, and we're going to go to one of the best-known idea men in the United States, and that is Benjamin Franklin. And then Alexander Hamilton also was really the first one that came up with the idea that the United States could be a business partner, meaning the government, the United States government, could be a business partner with advertising. Okay, this is the foundation of all advertising. We call it the 4 A's. First of all, we have to capture the consumer's attention. Now, that's hard to do in today's advertising landscape because the media messages are so pervasive. You are bombarded, depending on who you ask, between 3,000 and 5,000 messages a day. Okay, that's a lot for your brain to capture. If advertising can capture attention, then it has to create an awareness. Now, an awareness is simply when you think to yourself, that looks interesting. Now, the biggest shift comes between awareness and attitude. And that is, once we watch an advertisement, we understand what our feeling is towards that advertisement. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. But as human beings, we don't make most of our decisions based on reason. We base it on feelings, our emotions. And then for advertising to be successful, there has to be some sort of action. And all of those put together means that somehow the message resonates in the mind of the consumer. Okay, 3 very big ideas that came out of this modern approach to advertising was Gillette, J. Walter Thompson, and Cyrus Curtis. So, if you hate advertising, you can really go back and blame these 3. King Gillette came up with the idea, let's make a product that has to be repurchased. Let's make something disposable. Then advertise it aggressively, and voila, you have a constant source of money coming in. And you have a product that is very consumer friendly. Now, keep in mind, I have this picture up of the Gillette safety razor because when it first came out, there was a lot of concern about whether or not an amateur, being a guy shaving his own face instead of going to a barber, or having somebody that specialized in shaving. So, very powerful visual. Now, it's ridiculous if you sit here and analyze it, but it does convey the message that these are safety razors. Okay, so Gillette became one of the first to come up with the concept of reusable, disposable, and packaged goods. Now, J. Walter Thompson, one reason that he is such a biggie in advertising is that he came up with the idea that let's take magazines and make them a medium for advertising space. So I am an advertiser. I'm going to go to the magazine and said, you know, don't worry about it. I'm going to fill your advertising space, and then I'm going to pocket a commission for bringing the customer to you. Very successful, and magazines become a national ad medium. Okay. Cyrus Curtis took J. Walter Thompson's idea and established the modern day advertising agency. Let's just take all of this in-house. We're going to do everything for the business people, They pay us a commission, and we're in business. Now, I mentioned earlier that the very first ads were cave paintings and drawings. And in keeping that, the first ads were big posters, like 11 by 17 posters. Even though magazines had become a medium for the ads, posters are what were manufactured or printed most commonly. Big pictures that told a story. Advertising has always been story-based, at least modern advertising. Why is it so important that soap floats? That was their tagline. Does anybody know?
Well, I would say that in those days, if you're bathing, as the previous picture suggested, in a river, and the soap falls down to the bottom of the river, well, you're probably not going to find it again.
Exactly. And one also that was very important, that Ivory soap was the first one that came out that wasn't lye-based soap. That with the discovery of glycerin, that soap wasn't so harsh, it wasn't so heavy. And so that was one of the big selling features. And then we all know Coca-Cola. Okay. Coca-Cola as a company really has triumphed in the advertising business. And now, if you were to approach anybody at Coca-Cola, they would tell you they're not a soft drink, they're not a beverage company, they're an entertainment company. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And the cereals. Again, packaged cereal, packaged goods were very new. Okay, there was a huge evolution in advertising between 1900 and 1920. Lasker comes up with this idea that advertising is salesmanship in print. Now, in the 1900s, between 1900 and 1920, most of the goods in small towns were sold door to door. The Fuller brush, the carnation delivering your milk, the peddlers coming through with their wagons of goods. And as the population exploded, it became harder and harder to really reach the consumers effectively. And so Lasker came up with this idea that advertising then is going to help replace those door-to-door salespeople. Now, why is that such a big idea? Because he realized that you can't just say, here's Ivory soap, it floats. You have to, along with John Kennedy and Claude Hopkins, you have to give people a reason why. Okay, with the increasing competition, people were beginning to think, okay, well, I have choices now. I never had choices before. It was either Ivory soap or homemade lye soap. Okay. Lasker really began to write copy that appealed to the consumer psychologically. What does the consumer really need to hear? What do we need to know? And this is really the age when people found out that they smelled, that deodorant and perfume sales went through the roof, where social advertising, or I should say cultural advertising, really hit its peak, in that people suddenly understood that to be socially acceptable, there were cultural mores that you really had to follow. Okay, so here's some examples. Van Camp's pork and beans. 125 million explosions inside every grain. Now, we look at these ads and we think, why were these appealing in any way at all? Keep in mind, this is the beginning of packaged goods. People didn't really know what they were getting. There had to be a high level of education when it came to the consumers. Shaving cream. And this is one of my favorite. We take packaged orange juice for granted. But think back, and what would it be like, instead of having to squeeze your own orange juice, to be able to buy a container of orange juice? And this really helped educate consumers on, here's an easy way to drink your orange. Here's an easy way to get that fresh squeezed orange taste without you having to do all the work. Okay. I want to just back up here for a second and talk about the difference between a pull advertisement and a push advertisement. An example of a push advertisement would be advertising that is in your face constantly. What comes to mind are the Robin Brothers commercials in California, or the mattress company, "You're killing me, Larry, you're killing me." Okay, that it's over and over and over again ad nauseum. Now, that's a push advertisement. A pull advertisement is different in that what it really tries to do is to capture your attention and to pull you into the story. So the Lackawanna Railroad was really trying to promote a new route on the railroad. Their brand personality representing the brand is a woman named Phoebe Snow. She's all dressed in white. Now, the trains were coal-powered. It wasn't a clean ride when you rode on a train that was powered by coal. So they started this whole campaign based on the travels of Phoebe Snow. And of course, it's in a rhyme, the rhythm, it's memorable. The man in blue now helps her through all of the ads, Phoebe Snow, each passing look, you know, it's just a lovely, picturesque train ride. Very successful ad campaign at its time. Now, J. Walter Thompson also created what exists to this day is the creative and business team. Now, this happened to be a husband and wife team. She was the creative. She wrote the copy. Okay? He developed the ads, and he pitched the ads. She was the first one to use celebrities and the appeal of the celebrity endorsement. She also was the first one to really put the ad industry on its head by saying, look, if you're going to try and sell to women, you need to direct your ads to women and start pitching them on what they want. Okay, here's just some definitions of the pull versus the push. Now, this ad for Jordan was really trying to position itself as they were the underdog going up against the big guys, and they just push. They tried to pull you in with the story versus the pushing of the ads, which really looks at it like we have to tell you everything because, consumer, you're not smart enough to figure it out. I mentioned John Caples because he's the father of the direct mail. So all that junk mail you get all comes back to John Caples. He also was the one that created this. I know you can't read the ad, but down here at the bottom, for more information, just fill this in and send it. So he also developed the ability, or I shouldn't say the ability, gave the advertising agencies the ability to track their consumers. And that was something that became very important, especially in advertising marketing research with George Gallup, who went on and developed the Gallup polls. Ray Rubicam is important in the history of advertising because he really was the one that brought ethics into advertising. It used to be that advertisers would talk about how good cigarettes were for you. And of course, we all know that they're not. Okay, Ray Rubicam, elevated the standards of advertising and inserted a lot of ethical standards long before the government came up with the truth in advertising. He also is the one responsible for what we call image advertising. Very powerful visual, very powerful tagline, and even if you don't read the rest of it, it tells you the story. The brand, the visual, the tagline. And this is an advertisement for advertisers, for businesses, the reason that they want to come to Young and Rubicam. So this ad is very old, but it could easily be used today if you change the typography on it. Okay, I mentioned Hamilton and his idea of government and business teaming together. Well, advertising is used to promote war efforts by the War Advertising Council. What was important about this time period is, for the first time, socially, women were being presented as a viable part of the workforce. In fact, while the men went off to fight, if it wasn't for the women on the home front, okay, the work would not be won. And of course, we all know the Rosie the Riveter. Again, very strong image. Then we move on to the television revolution. At first, advertising wasn't really sure what to do with this new medium, and so, like they did with radio, advertisers would sponsor the television show. So it would be the Colgate Bob Hope Hour or something like that. Television ushered in the modern age of advertising. Why? Because it allowed a greater reach as well as a greater saturation of the market. Just like the printing press was huge, television was the next big mover in the market. Now, with the explosion of the media and with this new medium of television, okay, advertising is going to have an impact, and be part of social change. The 1960s were all about breaking the rules. The counterculture. Post-war America, post-war increase of consumption, but also this social change of now what are we going to do with all of this? Three influential individuals were Bill Bernbach. You may not know these guys, but you've seen their ads. Leo Burnett and David Ogilvy. They all started their own advertising agency, and with Ogilvy, he also wrote many, many books. Okay, Bernbach. Again, strong visual, strong headline. Doesn't really matter. This is a vacation spot, not just for the partiers, but for the family as well. Bernbach also was responsible for something that we call corporate advertising. Now, corporate advertising is when a corporation such as Mobil, Chevron, BP, whatever it happens to be, they're not promoting a particular product, they're promoting their brand by doing what is right for the society as a whole. Okay, so Mobil's campaign, We Want You to Live. Post spill in the Gulf, BP was talking about how it was helping the sea turtles by protecting their nests. That's corporate advertising. That is just simply getting you the association that Mobil is good for our society. Drunk driving, anti-drunk driving. Not playing chicken with the car. Okay, I'm going to hop over now to Leo Burnett, and you're going to see some ads you're probably very familiar with. The Marlboro Company came to Burnett, the advertising agency, and they wanted to remarket the Marlboro cigarette as a man's cigarette instead of the female. It was before it had been advertised to women. In fact, it even had a red tip so that you couldn't see lipstick marks on the cigarette. Apparently that was very important. But men weren't going to buy a cigarette that they considered feminine. So Leo Burnett came up with a concept of inherent drama, and that simply means find some sort of dramatic element, even if you have to create that element, and then build a story around it. So here is the Marlboro man, all alone, just him and his horse, on the range, rounding up cattle, but when he takes a break, he takes it with the Marlboro cigarette. How do you sell washers and dryers? You create a personality of the loneliest repairman. Why? Because it never breaks down. Now, what you're really selling is dependability through this personality. Okay, Burnett really developed something that has become known as nine-wheel logic. How do you give personality to a can of refrigerated dough? For years and years and years, good housewives made everything from scratch. Okay, Pillsbury wanted to promote their canned biscuits, their canned breads. So Leo Burnett created this personality called the Pillsbury Doughboy. And he's so cute. And you poke him in the stomach and he giggles. Okay, so what's nine-wheel logic? It's all based on a story. So the story goes that a father and his son come up to a railroad crossing. And if you've ever been to a railroad crossing, see how fast the train is just speeding by. And the little boy turns to his dad and says, "Dad, how can the train go so fast?" And even if the dad understood all the laws of physics and steam engines and all of that stuff, he could never dumb it down enough for his little boy to understand. So he looks at the train and he says, "Look at all the wheels." And the little boy said, "Oh, okay." That's a basic tenet in advertising persuasion. It's that give the consumer a reason to believe. Give them permission to buy into your brand, your product, your idea. How can you resist the Pillsbury Doughboy? Or the Jolly Green Giant? Or Little Nibs? Or Charlie the Tuna? Now, these are over 40 years old, these personalities, and yet they still exist today. Or cookies and crackers that are made by elves who live in a hollow tree, and we almost believe it, that there's a little bit of magic in all Keebler cookies. Permission to believe. It's all about the story. Now, David Ogilvy's approach was create a powerful image and help the reader along with the story. Okay, here's a very well-dressed, good-looking, distinguished man, and yet he's got a patch over his eye. Why? How? How do you get that patch? What's the story behind the patch? The intrigue is almost instantaneous whether we recognize that we're intrigued. I mean, if you were flipping through a magazine and you saw this guy without the eye patch, you're just going to keep flipping. But with that eye patch, it makes you stop, it captures your attention, and it makes you curious that hopefully you'll read the rest of it. High story value. Okay, a current take on that, of course, is the most interesting man in the world. Okay, in the 70s and 80s, there was a marketing revolution, and science really got involved in advertising. And it became all about how are we going to position our brand in the minds of the consumers. Because again, if you go back to the 4 A's of advertising, it's not just capturing their attention, but it's creating that awareness. So here's a new take on that old idea. Because there were too many products and too many messages, advertising was attempting to cut through the clutter. So there's always a top position and there's always a bottom position. Think about Coke and Pepsi. Coke is number 1. Pepsi came up with the whole idea of the Pepsi Challenge, how to take on the number 1, how to go from being second to first. Avis, their slogan has always been, we try harder. We have to. We're not number 1. They're taking on Hertz. And how do you position? You position your brand through relating to the consumers, and you relate through stories. Crest, still the number 1 toothpaste. The against position, Wendy's, where's the beef campaign? I don't know if any of you remember that. Little Clara screaming, where's the beef? Okay. The Uncola. Mentioned the against position, the Pepsi Challenge. The niche position is when you are coming out and you're only trying to not take over the entire snack food industry, but just get a little piece of the pie. Guacamole chips sell really, really well in the West, not so much in Iowa. And the new category. Apple, I have to say, You have to give kudos to Apple because they have perfected the art of advertising without paying for any kind of advertising. Every time they come out with something new, they hold what you call a press junket. And that's really nothing more than a very long advertisement for their new product. Okay, but what do we do now? Not only is the market even more cluttered, we have very cynical consumers. We have too many choices. We don't have enough time. Life is 24/7 at warp speed. How do you capture the consumers now? Well, to go forward, we're going to have to go back a little bit. We're going to go all the way back to 384 BC. Talk with Aristotle. Aristotle came up with the idea that as people were persuaded in three different ways. First, by logic. The numbers, the facts, the statistics. 9 out of 10 dentists prefer Crest. 9 out of 10 doctors prefer Tylenol for their patients who are in pain. Authorities are cited. That's logos or logic. Pathos. That's the emotions from joy to fear, from romance to sex appeal, the need for approval, and humor. Ethos is the appeal to character and virtue or credibility. Now, credibility comes in with celebrity endorsements, name brand recognition. You don't even have to see the word Nike and you know that's swoosh. You know the symbol for Mercedes. You know the red and white waves of Coca-Cola. You know the golden arches of McDonald's. They've been around for a very long time. They have an instant recognition, a credibility. Tiger Woods promoting Nike golf balls? Yes. Michael Jordan promoting basketball shoes? Yes. Okay? But you get somebody like Michael Jordan promoting Heineken? Not so much. Okay? There's no resonance there. There's no credibility in that you really think. I mean, I have a hard time when Tiger Woods was promoting Buick. Do you really think that he drives a Buick? No. I really couldn't see Tiger Woods in a Buick. And then we have postmodern appeals. And we're even going to have postmodern appeals once augmented reality gets into the game. Now, I want to talk just a minute on subliminal and seductive advertising. There is really no research that offers any kind of certainty that subliminal advertising really works. So an example would be is if you're at the movies and they show subliminally a picture of the Sahara Desert and then an ice-cold, refreshing cup of Coca-Cola. Are you going to go buy more cups of Coke because you saw the Sahara Desert? No. But if you're eating salty and buttered popcorn, yes, you'll probably refill your cup. I constantly hear from students that sex sells. Sex does not sell. If I showed you very, very sexy pictures, naked people, you're going to remember the naked bodies, but you're not going to remember the brand. Seduction, though, does sell. We have a need for emotional and tight relationships, sexual relationships, intimate relationships. And so seduction, yes. Getting you to admit those feelings, yes. Appealing to those feelings, definitely. Okay, so just kind of as a recap of what we've talked about, in this history of advertising, we're really talking about something called advertising strategy. And that is, it's art. It's a form of art. It's verbal carpentry. It's words on paper. It's words plus image, evokes emotions, and that's salesmanship. And as we heard before, advertising is salesmanship in print. So how do advertisers write persuasively? Well, first of all, you have to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. Is it an awareness problem? Is it a use problem? Is it's new? Is it you already have a saturated market, but somehow you want your brand to stand out? Well, it all comes down to who is your audience and what do they need? What do we really gain by drinking a Coca-Cola or by a Budweiser versus a Heineken, or Doritos versus Fritos? Where do we get our preferences? How are our preferences designed? How are they built? So you have to understand, where do you want the story to end before you begin telling the story? And who are you telling the story to? What do they need to hear? What do they want to hear? So advertising is simply communicating, understanding what you want to communicate to whom, and understand who is the person that you're trying to persuade. You can't develop a story if you don't know those two key points. Advertising tactics, then, is how are you going to communicate your story? Are you going to use traditional, or are you going to use non-traditional? Again, it goes back to what's your purpose and who's your audience. You have a generation of millennials that are very, very cynical about advertising. They really don't care what advertisers have to tell them. They're going to listen to what their friends say and what their friends know. They're going to rely on what's posted on Facebook and Pinterest and Snapchat. So you have to go to where those consumers are. You have to understand what their mindset is. And you have to create messages that are different, that catch the consumer off guard. In other words, something different. One of my favorites is the escalator ad. I just think it's very trippy. Okay, so where's advertising headed? Okay, there's a lot of text on the next couple of slides, and these are what the experts say. And I can really boil it all down to, you have to go back to what has always worked in advertising. And that is, respect your consumer, involve them in the story, help them relate to the story that you're telling, and under the respect umbrella is don't try and insult their intelligence. But if you can get them to laugh, and if you can get them to feel good, half the battle is won. Because there's not a whole lot in the world for most people to feel good about. And yet advertising can even help you feel good about advertising. Some of my favorite ads are ads that make fun of the fact that they're trying to advertise something to you. In other words, what you have to do is you need to connect to your consumers one-on-one. Salesmanship in print. Talk to the individual. Don't talk to the masses. Budweiser does an excellent job of connecting emotionally to their consumers, whether it's the Clydesdales bowing down to where the Twin Towers used to be, or finding that lost puppy, or the adult Clydesdales helping the newbie on the team to acclimate. There's some very powerful lessons in there that translate into cultural values. You're connecting with your consumers. They're going to trust you because you're showing them that you understand them. It's this, you know what, we're all in this together. I mentioned before about Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is an entertainment company. They just happen to sell soda and water. But really, Coca-Cola is not a destination point. Coca-Cola is an integral part of your everyday life, your celebrations, your sad times, when you go to the races, when you go to the movies, when you're at home watching Netflix. Coca-Cola is just a part of the entertainment portion of your life. In other words, every time you twist open that bottle, you're opening a little bit of happiness. Where we're going in the future, it's about relationship advertising. It's about the quality of the relationship with consumers. It's not just short-term sales. It's creating that lasting brand relationship. Okay, as much as I teach advertising and as much as I understand what I'm doing when I consume advertising, here's an example of the quality of the relationship. I only buy Jif peanut butter. I only buy Heinz ketchup. Why do I only buy Jif peanut butter? Well, Jif peanut butter reminds me of peanut butter and jelly, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches remind me of comfort food, and comfort food equals mom, and my mom always used Jif. Now that's a generational relationship. If I held up, and I've done this, a jar of Skippy and a jar of Jif, the ingredients, identical. What's different? The brand. Why do I use the brand? There's no reason to use any other, okay? That's create a relationship. Jiffy peanut butter has never let me down. Okay, I'm winding this up here because I'm sure that you guys are getting tired of listening to me. The power of social media, the power of the digital realm. Chapstick launched a campaign. We want you to tell us, where do lost chapsticks go? Okay, so this was one of the ad, and it created this furor. Okay, people, especially women, said that they really found this ad offensive. They posted it on Chapstick's Facebook. Chapstick took down the negative posts. That made them really mad. And then, of course, it just exploded all over the internet. There's a Forbes article. Real Girl blog is the one that really started talking about how Chapstick is not listening to their consumers. They pulled the entire campaign as a result. So when you put yourself out there on social media, be careful what you ask for. So to sum up, advertising, true advertising, persuasive advertising is about establishing a relationship. And it's a relationship based on shared values. Tell me what's in it for me. Give me a reason to believe. Do so in just a few seconds. Don't insult me. And you're probably going to have a loyal consumer for life. The bottom line is, whoever tells the best story wins. Budweiser, king of beers, and they are so. They're the best-selling beer worldwide, and hands down, they tell the best story. Our stories are reflected through the products we consume, the brands we support, the media that we watch, the stories that we tell each other. And I've given you a couple of, also a few more videos that you can watch, because I know that Jason will post this. Take a look at some of these ads based on the information that we've talked about, and see if your perspective as you watch the ads have changed. Advertising is pervasive. It impacts culture, and culture impacts advertising. It's not going anywhere. It's been here since the beginning, and it will be here until the end of time, my humble opinion. So, like all communication forms, advertising offers benefits, but also creates problems. And then I've also given some of my favorite ads. And any questions from anybody?
You're
This
just
is Anita.
okay. Go ahead, Anita.
And thank you so much for that presentation. It really summed up, I think, as well as any topic can be summed up in 1 hour's time. What advertising is, what it was, what it is, and our relationship, within that realm. And so I just really appreciate the bits and elements that you were able to bring out, because it really kind of ties everything together that we've been learning in this class with Jason.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate the time I spent listening to you pontificate here.
So, go ahead.
Okay,
Please.
this is. I also want to thank you. It's echoing. That? No. Okay. Yeah, this was very interesting. It's hard for me to talk. I'll text my.
Okay.
No problem. Do you mind getting some emails from the students, Carrie?
Oh, no, not at all.
So what email
Feel
address do
free
you
to ask
prefer?
me any question, and I could talk about stuff all day long.
So what email should they use, Carrie?
Use the perry@email.building.edu.
Okay. Sounds good. I want to just say to the students, I created a rather lengthy intro to this topic in your web materials, but like Carrie, I'm constantly searching for stuff, and I synthesize it and I put it all together, and I build a lot on Carrie's presentation, and give you a couple of theories of my own. And if you're interested in, I maintain 2 blogs. One is called Subtext, SUBTECHST for subtext. And in there, I suggest that one of the problems with advertising research, which is different than what Carrie was talking about, is that Matt Price is getting a PhD in media psychology. He works for Nielsen, and he did a great presentation at the last winter session. But you see what they do. They bring people into studios and they wire them up, and it all suffers from what we call the Heisenberg effect, which is the very act of measuring something changes the thing you're measuring. And so I'm proposing to the advertising world that we're going to be wearing GoPros at some point that are going to be so integrated into a hat or something. We'll go about our business and we'll use the candid camera approach to pick up the research data that we need, rather than make it a special event, which I think sort of skews how you respond to things. In any event, this week's material is packed with all sorts of that stuff, and there's probably far more than you're actually going to read or watch. So I want to make a pitch for watching 2 things, and it is listening to 2 short videos by Luntz, Luntz, and Rapaille, Rapaille. And if you just read through or search this week's site for those two names, they'll come up. And they're actually portions of videos, of frontline videos. And you're welcome to watch the whole video. The videos are fantastic. But those two, they're probably two of the most successful marketing researchers in the world, and they explain how they go about things. And it's just an absolutely eye-opening. They're eye-opening videos to watch. You won't be the same after you see them. So
yeah, they really are. I've seen both of those videos. And then I want to throw something else out there too. Something that I cross as well, and those that Jason's talking about. But the whole cognitive load and the idea of the GoPro cameras and chronicling everything and the Google Glass and all of that, at what point is it all too much? And at what point does our brain start saying, that's it, I'm going to quit paying attention to a lot of these messages? And this has real repercussions on any attempts at persuasion, whether it's professional persuasion with advertising and marketing, or if it's persuasion in our personal life, whatever it happens to be. So it's really interesting to see where all of this stuff is going to go. And then I think, Christine, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna but I was echoing so much. Yeah, it's very distracting when I'm on
That's
mute.
okay, just go ahead and talk.
Maybe if I plug my ears. Well, in the meantime, I can't, I very much appreciate it. And the history was, I would have loved to see some of the pictures, well, which I know you didn't put in here for a reason, but it's a factory thought. So see how the cavemen made their etchings or whatever, and the one. I mean, the entire history of Marlboro was amazing to me as well. And World War II, how advertising during World War II, how it stuck with whole awareness of women in the advertising world and in the real world. Inspires is it's just so wonderful, and I'm just did this and I'll ask questions. Right now I'm plugging my ears and my little message out.
okay, go ahead and feel free to email your question, and feel free to CC everybody in the class if you want. I find the questions that one student has are often questions that other students have, so please feel free to do that. Okay, you know what? I'm going to let you guys go. It's Sunday evening, and my grandkids are waiting for me, waiting for Grandpa to show up for dinner, so I should probably go. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, thank you so much. It's always an honor to be able to come and talk to your students, Susan. I really appreciate it.
Oh well, I'm forever in your debt. I mean, these are it's always great to listen to you, and I always learn something. And you know, the fact of the matter is, if there's one thing above all other things that I think a media psychologist should be conversant in and studying, it's advertising. It's the process of selling stuff to each other. And Daniel Pink's book, what's it called? Oh, To Sell is Human, I think, is just fascinating. He sort of approaches it from the point of view of we're all selling something. ourselves, our views, so on, and the persuasive techniques we use aren't that dissimilar from those that we see employed by the professional mediasts. So,
Oh, absolutely. Any of Daniel Pink's books are awesome.
I had the great pleasure of he opened a conference and I closed it as keynote speakers, and I got to know him a little bit. It was
Oh, wow.
it was fascinating. In any event, you guys, I will see you in Moodle, and you have no more written work except for your final project at this point. So just hop into Moodle, discuss things. Nothing you need to post to your e-portfolios, and I will send out. Everything is pretty much clear on the website, but I'll send out something that sort of jogs your memory about your choices for a final project. Okay?
Thank you. It was nice to meet everybody virtually.
All right. Thank you, Carrie.
Awesome.
Okay. Bye.